approach him, he's dead.
Hello, and welcome to Improv Autopsy. I'm your host, Stephen Cadwell. Today I interview a Chicago friend of mine, improviser, and all-around good guy Mike Geraghty. Mike worked at the bar at I.O. when Greg, Kayla, and I first met him. Knowing a few other Mikes, he quickly became Bartender Mike for us. My experience in Chicago was a whirlwind with so many contributing factors, and when I was there, most of the performers I would meet were so focused on their own success or their own plans that everyone else barely showed up on their radar. Mike Geraghty was different. Mike was always kind and earnest and sincere. Moreover, where many people saw improv in general and places like I.O. and Annoyance more specifically as stepping stones to bigger and better things, Mike genuinely has a love for the art form. Mike books gigs in Chicago and gets paid, but he does improv because he loves it, and I believe it loves him back. If you get a chance, you can see Mike performing with Dumb John at I.O. or other places around town, and if you're lucky, you'll be able to take a class with him. He's a great guy to call a friend, so get to know him if you meet him, and enjoy Mike Geraghty's Improv Autopsy. Well, thank you so much for joining me on our little improv romp.
Yeah, I'm honored to be here. That's good. It's great to see you again, talk to you again, man. I miss you.
Yeah, ditto. You're still in Chicago, but are you from Chicago?
No, I'm from Reno, Nevada.
I don't think I knew that.
You probably did, because I talk about it all the time. it's a big part of my personality.
What brought you to Chicago?
I.O., trying to perform at I.O.
Where was your first encounter with improv? Was that in Reno then?
That's a tough one, because I didn't really understand what I had thought improv was. Turns out wasn't really improv before I went to Chicago. So in high school, I did a lot of sports, so I didn't have a whole lot of time to do the drama thing, but I always loved doing drama and theater, and I would be involved in the drama club as often as I could and things like that. And we would do improv games, like in theater class or drama club stuff, which I know now are like short-form games. But back then I thought that was just what improv was. I didn't think it was anything else more than that, different than that. So it's I had no idea there was something called long-form improv. And when I moved to Chicago and started watching long-form improv and trying to do long-form improv, it took a really longer than it should have for it to click in my brain that it was something different. I was basically playing short-form games while everyone else around me was trying to do scene work. Oh, yeah, it was not... I remember level 1 at I.O. in class, they would get us on stage and basically tell us to go, like, go ahead, start. And I was like, start what? Like, I really don't understand what we're doing. Do a scene. I'm like, what does that mean, do a scene? A scene, like in a play? You know, I just couldn't figure it out for a while.
But whatever you saw, whatever you experienced in Reno was enough to get you hooked enough to move across the country.
I probably skipped a few parts of the story. So I actually grew up in California, in Stockton and Fresno, California. That's where I did high school drama and all that stuff. Did a lot of Shakespeare stuff when I was younger. And then when I was 18, I moved to Reno to go to college.
Gotcha.
And I loved it there. I stayed there a really long time, decade or more. So when I think of home, I think of Reno. And I'd always loved doing comedy. And being from Fresno, like a big part of what we did there was everyone raps. Like we rap at lunch, we freestyle battle at parties. It's just a thing all of us did. And so when I got into Reno, I started doing hip-hop shows and very quickly felt like something wasn't right. There was a lot of really great hip-hop talent in Reno, and they were like real hip-hop artists. They were living the life. And I was up there, I felt like a huge poser because even though I had a great passion for the music, I was not living that life. I was an outsider, basically, but I was like, you know what? I am a good rapper, and I am funny, so I started doing, like, comedy rap, and then I found, like, my slot in that local music scene. And that was going pretty well, and then I got booked for a festival to play at a festival, and I thought I was really honored because the guy who booked the talent was a hip-hop artist that I respect a lot, and I'm a big fan of. And I was talking to him, and he's like, yeah, it's great that you're doing this. We've never had a stand-up do the show before. And I was like, oh, no, he thinks I'm a stand-up. But I didn't want to lose the gig, so I just showed up and I did 20 minutes of stand-up, and I'd never done it before. It went really well, considering, and it was a whole new feeling. And I was like, oh, this is what I like. This is what I need to do. This is what I want to do. So right then and there, I just started doing stand-up and was doing stand-up in Reno. And we got part of that scene and was doing pretty good in that scene. The other half of my life, I was doing a lot of drinking and partying and getting in trouble. And I had a bunch of friends in Reno who had moved to Chicago to work in various other non-performance-related industries who were kind of worried about me, I think. So they kept calling me up and being like, hey, man, you can drink yourself into the ground and do stand-up anywhere. You might as well do it in Chicago where there's a higher ceiling for success. So I went out there and I visited, stayed on my buddy's couch for 3-4 months. I knew about Second City because I was such a huge fan of all the people that had come out of there, so SNL-type performers, and took a few classes at Second City, and I was like, this is great. I love this. I want to do this. Someone told me about I.O., and I went to go watch a show at I.O., and that blew my mind. It was the first time I saw a Herald, and I couldn't figure out what they were doing, how they were doing it. I was like, whatever this is, I want to do this. Went back home to work and save money for about a year, and then moved back to Chicago a year after that to try to figure out what this improv thing was.
Do you remember who it was that you saw when you went to I.O.?
Honestly, I never really thought about this before, but I think it was Big Spoon, which is a Herald team I ended up being on years later, and Virgin Daiquiri.
Okay.
It was like the very first show I saw.
That's pretty great.
That free Wednesday show, yeah.
Yeah, and those would have been house teams then as well, right?
Yeah, so it would have been, Virgin Daiquiri was a house team. It was an all-female team with a lot of legends on it. Colleen Doyle, Abby McEnany, Dina Fackless. 2 people from SNL, Cecily Strong. Gosh, who was the other?
80?
80 Bryant, yeah. And then they had the Herald team opener, which was Big Spoon, yeah.
And you fell in love.
Yeah, I can remember it distinctly because I have it burned into my memory of they were doing organic edits where they were being cows and running across the stage in between scenes. And I was like, why are they doing that? That's so crazy. Yeah. I mean, I was probably on my second Herald team before I figured out what an organic edit really was. I was really slow on the uptake.
I blame instructors.
Yeah, me too, actually.
So then you moved to Chicago, and you hadn't had any formal improv training, even in short form? It was just the high school stuff?
0, yeah, doing improv games in theater class a handful of times. But I had done a lot of stand-up and a lot of hip-hop.
Did you find that helpful, or did you find that you needed to break some habits because of that experience?
In the long run, helpful. In the short term of trying to learn improv, it was a lot of bad habits that I had to break. I had that timing and that rhythm from stand-up. If you're doing stand-up and you're not getting a laugh every 30, 40, 60 seconds, you're dying up there. Whereas in improv, you might get a laugh every 3 minutes, and that's normal, and that's good, and that's great. You're crushing it. So I would have this itch. I'd feel the rhythm of my old stand-up rhythm, and I'd be like, oh, we got to get a laugh. This scene isn't getting a laugh. And I would try to do something funny to hit those beats. And I think that really slowed down my progress and understanding of good scene work. But then again, growing up freestyle rapping had developed that part of my brain that could improvise. So in that regard, I think it was, at least I had that part of my brain kind of developed.
Yeah, I imagine just the stage time, too, being up in front of people was helpful.
Yes. Being extremely comfortable on stage in front of a group of people is very helpful. But I was so terrified to do improv. It was weird because I'd never had stage fright before until I started trying to do improv. And then my hands would be shaking. I was so nervous and I couldn't think. I couldn't be present. And it took a very, very long time. It took a couple years of performing improv to get that to go away.
My first improv teacher said that doing improv was like being naked on stage.
Yeah.
And
yeah.
I took that to mean in some ways that, if you're doing a scripted play of some kind, you've got the playwright to blame, you've got the director to blame, you've got all these other people that are kind of in between you and the audience. I imagine there's a lot fewer of those hurdles or those filters between you and the audience when you're doing stand-up, but when you're doing improv and you're making it up, there's 0. You don't even have other material to fall back on.
Yeah, when you're crafting a stand-up set, you have to work it out live in front of people, so you have to eat shit for a while and bomb over and over again until your jokes form. But you go in knowing that this isn't going to be, that you're workshopping, so you're not going out there expecting to crush. And then once you've got it figured out, then you're like, oh, now I know how to get a laugh at the exact moment I want to, because I have done this 1,000 times and it never changes. So even in the process of crafting stand-up jokes, you don't have that vulnerability feeling as not nearly as much as an improv. Ever.
Do you remember your first class then?
Technically, it would be level A at Second City.
Okay.
Yeah, which is another reason why it took me so long to figure out good improv, because Second City is the worst institution on earth for teaching improv. I think their improv is garbage over there, and they teach it in a way that creates garbage improv. Anyone who's ever been incredible at improv at Second City, which is tons of people, got good at I.O. or Annoyance or somewhere else. But there's a stark difference when you look at someone who's only trained Second City, try to improvise, compared to someone who has a more rounded education. But yeah, I took level 8 at Second City, which was short form games for 8 weeks. And then went over to level 1 at IO, which was scene work. And that was a stark difference. Yeah, seeing a Herald and then taking a class at IO was like enough for me to be like, this is my thing. This is more, this captivates me. The Second City thing was just a lot of fun, but it didn't feel like work. It didn't feel like art. But IO felt fulfilling in a much more... I just kind of got that bug. I was obsessed. I was like, I need to figure out what this is. This is something special that I need to figure out.
My impression of A through E over there was that, and this could be completely wrong, I'm not saying that this is definitely how things are, but my impression was that anyone who had a little bit of improv ability or knowledge could teach, because that was a moneymaker for them. So anyone could teach, and there was really very little, there was no programming that they had necessarily, that this is what you need to do in A, et cetera, et cetera. So it was just kind of a hodgepodge. And when you went through, there was no end goal either. It's just, congratulations, you did A through E.
Right. Yeah. It's just a moneymaker for them. And then you go into learning how to write sketch, which they do very well there.
Yeah.
Using improv as a tool to write sketch over there. So you never really learn how to improvise scene work there. That's my hot take anyway.
Yeah, I'm with you. And I should also say, though, that I mean, the theater that I came from in Florida, and I feel at IO as well, Annoyance, all theaters, the classes are a moneymaker. So it's not like that's necessarily a bad thing, but it seemed like extra evident at Second City.
Improv shows is like the worst business plan. You can't run a business off impossibly inconsistent performances. You got to have that training center.
Yeah. So you went through then all the levels at IO. There were both 5A and 5B, 4A and 4B at the time.
Yep. That's how they did it then. And you were in my 5Bs. I think maybe a couple of the other ones. So I had some classes with you.
Yeah.
Yeah, I stopped Second City. I did IO, the whole program. When I was in 5Bs, which was the last level at IO, I started taking classes at the Annoyance. I think when I was in level 5, because I did the first 3 classes at Annoyance before I quit going over there. But once I started learning like their philosophy while I was in the more advanced scene work classes at IO, like doing those at the same time, is when things finally started clicking for me. And like that's, I think, when I turned a corner and started being like, oh, I think I could become good at this.
And what was your first Herald team then?
That was The Incident.
Oh,
yeah.
With Will.
Yeah, with Will Minan. Yeah, a team that was absolutely stacked. There was so much talent on that team that it is mind-boggling to me that we were so bad and never had a good show. We could not get it together, man. It was crazy. And I didn't know any better back then. I wasn't a huge help, because even though I was on that Herald team, I didn't really understand what a Herald was. I skipped a lot of classes going through the IO program. Again, bartending, partying, I'm not waking up early for this class every week kind of thing. So I never learned the Herald, and then I was on a Herald team. So I just pretended like I did. And after a very long time, I started kind of understanding what it was, and then we got cut. I was just firing from like instincts from the seat of my pants the whole time.
I feel like depending on who you had, and if everyone would have come from the same instructor, depending on the level, I forget which one where they really dig into Herald in the 4s.
Yeah, somewhere in the 4s.
But you all could have learned the Herald differently, depending on who you had, if you all had different instructors, so that was probably not helpful either.
And everyone on that team had such a different idea of what they wanted the shows to be. And that's the one thing that I really learned throughout my years, and something I try to teach or coach when I'm coaching someone, is you can skip so many steps with trying to get good by just simply agreeing with your ensemble on what type of show you want to have. You don't have to agree on a form. You don't have to agree on a tone. You don't have to agree on a voice, any of that. I mean, it's great to agree on all that stuff, but what I'm saying is if everyone has an idea of, I think we should be patient up top, maybe don't do a lot of walk-ons or whatever at the beginning, and pick up the pace and the energy in the last half of the show. Let's try to end it with some callbacks from the top of the show. If everyone can just agree that that's the type of show they want, whether or not that happens, everyone's going to have the same sort of philosophy of that piece in the back of their mind, and things are going to go so much better. And The Incident, we never had that. We just couldn't agree on what we wanted the pieces to be. I don't even remember having that.
Did you have anything in your mind that you wanted it to be that would have contrasted, or was it just no one really had any idea?
Absolutely. No, absolutely not. I didn't know what I was doing. I didn't know what it was supposed to be. I was just trying to be funny and support people's mood. That's all I was trying to do. So yeah, I was definitely part of the problem.
Do you remember any hard fails or shows that were particularly wonky?
Hard fails. Well, honestly, when I think of hard fails, what I think of the most is a different show that I was in at IO. And I attribute this show to what made me break that plateau and cross the threshold into a decent improviser. It was a show called Set to Scene, like set to scene. And it was a show that had an absolutely flawed premise and was orchestrated for failure. And we went up there every single week and sucked bad at 110%, at 200 miles an hour. We played so hard, so fast, and sucked so hard the entire time, and never had it. Just every show was a bomb, week after week, and we expected it, and we kind of enjoyed it, and it made us, at least for me, not scared to fail anymore. Yeah. But the premise of this show was we would have stand-up comedians pull suggestions written on pieces of paper out of a bucket and try to improvise stand-up sets based off those. Then we would try to improvise scene work based off their improvised stand-up. So that old saying, you can't parody a parody. You know, not only were we trying to make jokes into scenes, which is hard to do, especially for all of us that were like relative beginners, but the way we got people to come to the show was we advertised it as an open mic for stand-up comedians. But if you wanted to sign up, you had to watch our show first. So we had a room full of stand-up comedians that didn't want to watch our show, that begrudgingly sat through it while they were waiting for the sign-up sheet to come out. And we're sitting there just writing jokes in their notebooks the whole time while we were trying to do long-form improv to them. So like the whole thing was a big scam. But it was so much fun. Max Gannett, who's a great, funny improviser from the team Devil's Daughter, I remember he said something after a show one time that I think about every time I have a bad show, and it pulls me right back out of the mud and into feeling good again, which is we just got done with one of our horrible shows. We walked into the green room after the show was over. Everyone's kind of quiet, feeling kind of bad about ourselves. We plopped down on the couches. No one's saying anything. And all of a sudden, Max Gannett goes, well, you know what, guys? Improv can't always be just okay. And it killed me. I laugh so hard. Now I think about that every time. You know, like, what are we doing? We're playing make-believe on stage. I don't want to, like, say bad things about improv because it is my art and I love it, but it's a kind of a dumb thing we do, so we can't get too worked up about it.
Yeah, no one's going to leave the show richer or healthier than they arrived.
Yeah.
If anything, they might feel better because they laughed and had a good time, but it's not, it is what it is.
I will say, when done right, which is a subjective way to say that because there's no, like, one right way to do it, but when done right, it can be a mind-blowing, beautiful piece of art.
Yeah.
It's just so hard to get there.
Well, that was Set to Scene, and you were in The Incident. Any other teams or groups between your graduation and your current Dumb John?
Yeah, well, Dumb John was actually a team that was like around the whole time. It was while we were going through classes. It was one of those things where your classmates are like, "Hey, you want to start an improv team?"
Yeah.
And then you go like try to get a show at the Conservatory or like Underground Lounge or something. And so we put this team together, called it Dumb John, and we never rehearsed. We did maybe one show a year. And it was like that for many years where we were a team that never did improv until the new IO opened and they had more stages, so more opportunities. And we're like, hey, why don't we just try to do this Dumb John thing? And we pitched a show and ran it for a month and it went really well and we had a lot of fun. So we just started continuing to do that and we played regularly to staggering audiences of 3 to 7 people for years. for like Sunday night, 8 p.m. for like 4 years, slowly kind of developing our own form and getting better and better. And now I'm still on Dumb John. We're doing really well. We do a show every week. But that team has been around since day one.
And there have been others though as well, right? The Incident was canceled, or was
The Incident was. That's funny. I was working as a bartender at IO, and Sharna, the owner of the theater, I bartended there for years. And it took her like 4 years to learn my name, and then one day she came up to me and she was like, Mike, you're pretty funny. You've ever thought about going into comedy? And I was like, Sharna, I'm on one of your Herald teams. And she was like, really? What's it called? And I said, The Incident. She was like, oh, great, I'll come see you. So she came to our next show and then cut us afterwards.
So it's your fault.
Yeah, I mean, I'm a culprit for a lot of things wrong with that team. But then after The Incident got cut, Big Spoon, who was a really good team, who'd been around for a while, grabbed Will Minen, Spencer Ryback, and myself from The Incident and added us to Big Spoon.
Okay.
Which was a really good team that played for years and years, and we still do shows from time to time.
Big Spoon?
Yeah.
Any other teams in there?
Not really. I mean, I do Armando. I've been doing Armando, not consistently, just kind of whenever I have a free night, I'll go do Armando. We did a version of Set to Scene, like a reboot of Set to Scene at the Annoyance, and called it Nervous Breakdown. Same exact show. We didn't trick people into going to it this time. And we were all just a little bit better at improv than before, but I wouldn't call that doing great work, but it was a lot of fun still. Another great way to learn and fail and get reps. Failing hard is a really valuable thing to do retrospectively. Those are, even though we were always so bad with those two shows, it really helped forge the steel.
Yeah.
There was a team I was on. We did like two shows at like Upstairs Gallery. Someone had the idea of like, let's get a 10-person team, and the only rule is all 10 people have to be in every scene of the show.
Yeah.
We tried that for a couple shows. It was awful. People quit. We all quit. Will Minen and I had a 2-person team. We called it McClintock, which was a really fun. I mean, our dynamic is great because Will Minen is such a phenomenal player.
Yeah.
Very intellectual, and I play very. Will is he's gonna approach a scene from a very intellectual viewpoint, whereas I'm gonna try to run through the back wall. So the two of us had a real like Abbott and Costello dynamic. That was fun. There's another 2-person team that I've done a few times, which I would like to do more with Brad Pike, called Boy Hunter, because I'm kind of a large, burly guy, and he's kind of a smaller, boyish look. And so he puts on a little beanie hat with a propeller on it, and I put on my cowboy hat, and we go out there and say, we're Boy Hunter. Can I get a suggestion? And I get a suggestion, and then he gets a suggestion. So we each have one. And then we set a clock for 30 seconds to a minute while he tries to escape me running around the room, and I try to catch him. And if I catch him, we use my suggestion. If I don't, we use his suggestion. Another team that a Herald team that I'm still on, and we still do shows sometimes, is called Heraldo, which is a team that does a show completely in Spanish.
Oh, great.
Yeah.
I think I remember seeing something about that. Are you fluent in Spanish?
I used to be. I am no longer what I would call fluent, but I am good enough to communicate. I can do an improv show in Spanish, for example. I may not know everything everyone else is saying, but I can read the emotion and the physicality, and I know enough to communicate what I would like to communicate.
So you're there to participate, not just to be the guy that doesn't understand.
Right. Yeah, no, I'm good enough to know. I'm good enough to be on the team. It's kind of a cheat code, actually, because I am the only white person on the team, plus I have red hair, so no one expects me to be good at Spanish, so really the first thing I say in any Heraldo show gets a huge reaction. So it's kind of a cheat code.
It's awesome. Are you teaching now?
Yeah, I teach level 2 and level 3 at IO.
Level A at Second City, your favorite improv
level
class.
A at Second City. I'm teaching teaching pratfalls at Conservatory.
How long have you been teaching?
Oh, I've been teaching off and on probably since 2019 or so.
And you dig it?
Yeah, I enjoy it a lot. When I have a class of people who care about the craft and learning it and take it seriously, it can be, really rewarding. I like to teach it from a place of like discovery. So I'm always discovering things with the group in class, and it can be very fulfilling. If it paid more, I would do it more. But as is, I just kind of do it infrequently. And I really enjoy coaching teams too, which is something I don't do regularly, but when I have time.
Is there anything in particular that you can point to, either teaching or coaching, and say, I learned this through that experience? It's a question I don't think I could answer myself, but I do want to say that teaching really made me a better improviser, but I don't know if I can point to any specific thing. But I think when you have to articulate things to try to teach them, it forces you to understand them.
Yeah. I can agree with that. When I started teaching, it was before I was teaching classes at IO, I was asked to do some workshops. And people wanted me to do a workshop for like physicality because of how physical I play in Dumjon. And I thought about it and I was like, I don't really know how to do what I do. I've never thought about it. I just do it. So I had to like reverse engineer a thought process because I really don't have a thought process. I'm always just kind of reacting or firing impulsively. So reverse engineering that into something I could write down was extremely helpful. But then when I started teaching the curriculum at IO, a big part of successful scene work is things like character POV. Having one is the greatest gift you can give yourself and your scene partner. And really hammering that into people's heads when I was teaching reminded me of how helpful that can be when like going into a scene with a character POV as opposed to discovering it in the scene, which is what I would usually do, is I would just go out there and then react, and then that's my thing for the rest of the scene. But teaching people about it, I was like, well, actually, that's so much smarter. So I actually started trying to do that more, and it's been really fun and helpful. Like, hey, I'm going to have a POV before this scene even starts, and then whatever the scene is, doesn't matter. I've got my POV, I'll make it work. So yeah, that's an example of something I started using after I started teaching, I guess, more so.
And did you develop your own curriculum, or were you given something that was like, this is what they need to know by the end of level 1?
IO has its own curriculum. A lot of times I'll maybe change what they want me to do with something that I prefer to teach the same concept.
Sure.
There's some exercises I think are less helpful at teaching a certain concept than others. So I teach the same concepts they want me to teach, but I'll probably only keep half to 60% of the exercises in the curriculum for it. You know, like that whole organic whooshy stuff?
Yeah.
I think definitely has its place, and I like to do that on stage, but I don't like having a portion of every class dedicated to that. I think there's much faster ways to learn things, so I'll keep some of that stuff in and try to get rid of a lot of the rest of it for more instructional.
Instead of the whooshy, you're more moo, stampede?
Yeah. Well, I mean, there's one week where they want us to do like 2 hours of essentially different kinds of interpretive dance, improvised interpretive dance. And I'm like, you know what? We can do this for 10 minutes, and that's about, you're going to get what you're going to get out of it. Now let's talk about scene work.
Yeah. And the goal there is just movement, or?
Well, I mean, I guess there's different goals for it. I think one thing is very good at teaching is commitment.
Yeah.
You only look stupid on stage if you feel stupid on stage. So,
yeah.
Or if one person on stage isn't committing, then everyone looks dumb. So teaching people that whooshy stuff can be incredibly theatrical and effective in a show, if they commit, I think is a very powerful thing to learn.
Yeah.
So I kind of, once I can see that clicking, then I will kind of move away from it and still use it, but more sparingly.
Now, I think I can guess the answer to this, but do you enjoy bad improv if you're watching it?
Okay. So here's the thing is, I wish I could say I did. I really do, because I feel like I would be such a better artist if I thought that way. Some people I really, really respect, like Noah Gregoropolis, he would watch improv, good, bad, any kind of flavor, and he would just talk about what a beautiful art this is. Anyone who thinks you have to do it a certain way, or anyone who thinks so-and-so is better than someone else or doesn't deserve to be on stage as much as someone else is full of shit. And it's a beautiful thing that we are creating in the room together at the same time, no matter what. And I think I agree with that. I just wish I felt more of that when watching bad improv, because bad improv really bums me out sometimes. Now, if someone's like very new at it, like if I'm watching my students do a piece, I get a lot of joy out of it because I can see them trying to work on things that we talk about, or I can see things that maybe we need to work on more. But yeah, I don't know, it kind of bums me. I think watching people's attitude can really go a long way. You know, if there's an improviser on stage that I can see is like judging other people on stage, I hate watching that.
Yeah.
And that happens a lot. I mean, I do it sometimes even. Like, that's something we always got to fight against. But no, sometimes if I'm watching a team open for us and they're not having a great show, I might not watch the whole set because I don't want to feel bummed out before my set.
I think that's fair.
I think it's fair. I don't feel good saying it, and I don't think it's the right way to think, but it is honest.
Yeah. What I was trying to get at was what you said about your students, because I feel the same way. If you're watching people and they're really being earnest, especially if they're people that you have a connection with of some kind, then that's infinitely more enjoyable to watch them trying their best and not necessarily reaching the pinnacle of the art form versus people that are just, they're stuck here, they've been here, maybe they don't even care that they're at this level, sort of not doing it for any other reason than because they enjoy the misery of the audience. I don't know.
Yeah, because no, they're getting themselves off. Actually, you know what? But this is something I hammer home with my students really, really, really hard, and I think it's one of the most important things, and I believe in it wholeheartedly. Is when you are learning improv, you have to watch shows.
Yes.
You have to watch as much improv as you can, and you can learn just as much, if not more, about how to become a good improviser from watching bad improv as you can from watching good improv. They are both equally important, and you shouldn't only watch one. You got to watch both. If you watch both and you watch a lot of both, you will get better. And I don't just preach that. I kind of explain to them how to watch improv. Okay, what are things we worked on in class this week? So go watch shows, look for examples of that, whether it's successful. I don't like to say good or bad. I say whether it's
right.
successful or not as successful.
Yeah.
And then think about why was it successful. Think about why was it not as successful. And then let's break it down next week when you come back, kind of thing. So I do think it's important and good to do. But at this point in my improv journey, I've seen enough bad improv. I don't need to continue watching it.
Yeah.
Apropos of nothing.
Well, and to your point as well, I think when I was in Chicago, when I was on my Herald team, I wasn't in the best headspace for a variety of reasons, but I think that I did not make that team any better because I was probably the grumpy old guy, because I would get frustrated at choices that people would make. Instead of trying to make them look better, instead of embracing it with all my heart, I would get frustrated because like, oh, this isn't where we should be going, or this isn't going to lead us where we want to be. And I was never then fully present to be able to be the teammate that they needed. So I was not helpful in making that and we got cut, not because of me, but I sure didn't help.
Yeah, I think there was a point in my journey when I got pretty good at improv, but I was very much, anytime someone did something that I thought was not helpful to a scene or not helpful to the piece or whatever, I would judge it, just like you're saying, and get in a bad headspace about it, and then wouldn't be present anymore. And then I would be like, well, if so-and-so didn't do it to that scene, then it would have, blah, blah, blah. And it wasn't until I moved on from that toxic way and that completely unhelpful way of thinking that I was able to get to the next stage of maybe being even a little better. Because I thought about it one day and I'm like, oh, this is like judging someone else's improv moves and blaming them for something is analogous to like if you're like claiming to be a good at karate or wrestling or fighting or something, and you're like, let me show you a move. Watch, I can get out of this move. Watch, grab my wrist. No, not that wrist. Grab this wrist. Yeah, grab this wrist. And then you just twist and but no, you're doing it too hard. Well, I could have done it if you weren't squeezing my wrist so hard. It's like, no, you don't know karate. That's the problem. It's not the other person's fault.
Right. Yeah.
So I thought about that one day and I'm like, oh, this is, and then the other ideas I had was like, well, if TJ Jagodowski would not get thrown off by this, then that means it's possible that this is not that person's fault.
Yeah.
Because he can make anything work.
Yeah.
So if that's true, then it's true that I need to take more ownership on things.
Yeah, one of the big moments for me was I was at an audition at Annoyance, and again, just strange headspace for me at the time, but it was me, and I forget, I don't know who it was. I don't know if they're anybody now, probably not. We started, and she started by saying, Bon Jovi, and like endowing me as Bon Jovi. And I think in that moment, I may have deflated a little bit, but I was like, it's okay. So I was like, yeah, hey, you want to come back to my dressing room and pour some sugar on me or something like that? And she's like, Bon Jovi doesn't sing that song. And at that point, I gave up. I was just like, ugh. And
yeah.
In retrospect, I'm like, were those the best offers? Maybe not, but I should have been able to handle that. And the reason that scene failed was my fault, not hers, because I could have been like, that's what you think. Or, there's oodles of ways that I could have rejoined that in a way that would have made that meaningful and kept the scene alive, but instead I gave up and feel bad about it to this day.
Yeah, man, nothing feels worse than bad improv. Nothing feels better than good improv.
Yeah. So, hey, I want to switch gears a little bit. I have a sort of a behind the actor studio questionnaire for you.
Oh, cool.
Mike, how do you get into the proper headspace to play?
Well, it's changed over the years. For the first 10 years, my only thing that I tried to do was not get too drunk. And now I don't really drink. So, but also like that, not getting too drunk as my only prep before a show meant I did a lot of years of bad improv. What I like to do is check in with the people I'm going to be on stage with, whether it's hanging out with them and just getting in a good conversation before we hit the stage, or like with Dumb John, we will talk to each other, get in a good conversation, and then maybe just a minute or two before we hit the stage, for at least a minute, we'll say like, anything you want to try for your own personal goal for the show tonight, or do you have any goals for the show tonight, or do you have any thoughts about the show tonight? And then we'll just each go around and say something like, yeah, I want to know you and love you in every scene. Or, I don't know, I'm going to keep an eye out for patterns tonight or moves and just try to really heighten things. We'll all just kind of like say something like that. So just checking in with my teammates before I hit the stage is really, really helpful for me. Otherwise, I try to just not think about what's going to happen. Yeah. The more I think, it's like, I always like think about it as golf. Like the more you think about your swing, the worse it gets.
Yeah.
At least for my brain.
Were you ever a warm-up guy?
Yes. I think warm-ups are great for warming up different parts of your mind and body that you would like to use. So I'm very specific with my warm-ups when I teach a class. If we're working on a specific concept, I'll pick warm-up games that will work on that part of your brain to get it firing. So if it's a class about listening, maybe I'll do some memory or some pattern games or whatever. For the most part of my improv journey, especially when I was so nervous to get on stage, warm-ups really helped because it made me feel like I was doing everything I could to put myself in position to have a good show. But now, just talking to my teammates, even just a normal conversation about something funny, whatever it is, just having a conversation is a warm-up for me now. And that warms me up in a better way, just for me. That is something I like to do. Warm-up games, to me, are a little bit less effective than just having a conversation with my teammates at this point.
Yeah.
And also, like, having that talk about what kind of show do you want to have tonight, or do you have any personal goals tonight, that's all I need for a warm-up. But I do consider that a warm-up.
Yeah. I think a lot of warm-ups are geared to get everybody on the same page, and the conversation can do that.
Yeah. There was a warm-up that Big Spoon had that was our own version of a warm-up that everyone knows, but it was just changed to be our own unique version of it. We did it together before every show, and it just really helped us feel like sort of a collective joy to be around each other and excited to go do a show together. It definitely just helped us, like, jack our hearts up and sync them together.
Yeah. I like that turn of phrase. Do you have a favorite get for, other than chasing someone around and then using...
Yes, there's two favorites that I use almost exclusively. The first one is one that Pat Rourke from Big Spoon used to use, and I love the way he did it, so now I do it, which is, can we get a suggestion of a word that you like to say, like onomatopoeia or cornucopia, like that? And then Katie McLean from Dumb John would start every show with, to get us started, we get a suggestion of any word in the whole wide world. And I love that. I don't like it as much when a team has like a very specific get. Not that there's anything wrong with that. I don't like judge it anyway, but to me it's just like a little performative when we don't need to be in that moment. Let's get the suggestion and then get to the performance. But I don't love hello, where are the tugboats? What's the last thing that tooted your horn? Something like that. Or like, can we get a suggestion of something that is not food and not naughty? I don't like putting guardrails up on that. And if that means you get pineapple and dildo as a suggestion every week, then just burn those two suggestions when you get the get.
Yeah.
Can I get a suggestion of any word at all, like pineapple or dildo? Then you won't get those two words. But, yeah, I like to leave it open.
On the spectrum of the language, dildo is here, pineapple's here. What's the word right in between?
Yeah. Smooth pineapple. But I think a word that you like to say or that's fun to say is a great ask, because then you're going to get a funky sounding word or a fun sounding word, because it puts people's mind in the direction of, oh, I do like saying a certain word, as opposed to, can I get a suggestion to get us started? The first thing anyone ever thinks of is pineapple or food or like whatever the last thing, banana, something like they're trying to be funny or something. So I don't like super directed get, but I like a little bit of what's something fun you like to say.
Yeah.
Then you'll get like a really abstract word sometimes, like doppelganger or...
Yeah.
Cool.
I think that little bit of guidance as well helps filter out some of that other stuff, because then it frees their imagination to go toward a specific thing, even if it's not ultra specific, because then they have to ask themselves, oh, what do I like to say? What is a fun word to say? Instead of, like, what's something funny I wanted to shout out?
Yeah, or like the first thing that comes to anyone's mind is usually, for some reason, the food.
It's all those bananas you used to sell at the bar. That's why.
Yeah, well, you didn't see any improvisers getting cramps, did you?
No, no, that's true. That is true.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Do you have a least favorite suggestion that you would burn other than dildo and pineapple?
Starbucks.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's like, can I get a suggestion of a place that would fit on this stage? Is one I hear a lot
Yeah.
and one I've done a lot, and it's always Starbucks. So I'm like, great, let's set ourselves up to have transactional teamwork for this whole show.
Yeah. I love it. Describe your onstage persona. How is onstage Mike different than offstage Mike, if there's a difference?
I think onstage me is exactly like offstage me. However, I'm a little more performative and heightened with some of the things I would normally not say out loud, because I do feel that the way I look on stage, it takes people a little while to warm up to me when they see me, because I look like the guy that was pushing everyone in lockers in high school. So they're not going to be like, what's this guy going to try to make us laugh? Fuck this guy. I kind of have to overcome that when I hit the stage, and I'm really not like that in real life. So I might heighten that part of me that is a little bit less put together, I guess. Like, I lose my train of thought sometimes on stage and I lean into it. And that's like a big part of when I'm hosting or talking to an audience is a lot of like if there's anything about me that feels vulnerable in that moment, I will push it out to the audience for them to see. Whereas off stage, I still have those. I just don't push them out for people to see.
Sure. And you do that to combat the stereotype they're putting you in?
Yeah, I think it's endearing to have someone who looks like a bully come out there and clearly want to be, not from a desperate place, but just from a place of, I deserve it too.
Yeah.
A boyish charm, I guess. Like a little boy whose brain is too small for his body.
Yeah.
Is sort of how I am in real life, but I just heighten that when I'm on stage.
Love it. What inspires you on stage?
So the people who I find the funniest people on earth are people I've been lucky enough to be on teams with. And watching people just go full, do what they do, brings me so much joy and happiness that a lot of times, to the detriment of a piece, I will purposely just sit back and enjoy my teammates doing whatever it is they're doing, and maybe not give them that edit that they deserve, because I just want to watch them go off, and I love it, and that brings me so much joy on stage, and I think that shows through in my plays. Joy inspires me on stage. I think I could take it one step further and say friendship. I'll play with anybody, and I'll enjoy playing with anybody, but if I can play with someone I consider a true friend that I trust off stage as well,
yeah,
that feels like home to me.
Yeah. Is there anything that shuts you down or takes you out of it on stage?
Yeah, piano players. I don't like that.
What? Just like if there's someone and you're looking down, they're in the front row, they're at the table in the front, and you see that they have long fingers, you're like, oh, this guy's probably a piano player. And
oh God, that's so funny, because of course that's what that sounds like out of context. At the IO Theater, forever and ever and ever, for all the Herald shows, they would have musical accompaniment. So there would be a pianist off stage at a piano playing improvised piano music to accompany your improv show.
Yeah.
And I never liked that because I think it's silly. I don't think it's necessary. I don't like when they try to use music to inform the scene or pimp you into singing a song or anything like that. I think you should be able to get the audience to connect with you on an emotional level by showing true emotions, emotional reactions, recognizable human behavior. And I think a piano or a song is a way to cut all that out and try to get there faster, cheating way. These are like really strong opinions, and I don't think I'm 100% right on these, because I think there's a million ways to do improv and not only one right way, which I repeat a lot whenever I talk shit. But I also don't like that historically at I.O., the only person in a show that gets paid is the person on the piano, who I don't really think adds much to a piece, at least a non-improvised musical piece. There'll be times where I'm digging deep for an emotion and I start getting into it, and then the piano player starts playing something completely different.
Yeah.
And now I got to kind of go with that thread, which of course is improv. Everything's a gift, right? But it throws me off. I don't love it. Yeah, that, and the other thing that really throws me off is a walk-on that is not being done for the purpose of heightening what you're already doing or adding to what you're already doing. Sometimes people will walk on just to say something funny or just to be on stage. with no other ideas or no plan, and that really throws me off, especially if it's before you've really established a good relationship with your scene partner. Yeah, so those two things I do not love.
I've worked with some tremendous musicians who have been great at adding scoring to the scene that's going on. But I've also been with musicians that it's like after the show, I have to be like, look, we can't fight you. If we think this is the tone of the scene and you're playing circus music, it has to become a circus because we cannot fight the piano. It's too overpowering. And yeah, it's super frustrating because like we're supposed to be doing this together and you took over.
Yeah, I mean, I can see where there's a place for it. No argument. There is a place for it in some improv, but it is the one thing that's not necessary.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
It can add to a show, sure, but you don't need it. And just like trying to write something that's tight, you want to trim off the fluff and get down to the important notes, you don't need it.
Well, it's juggling bowling pins and then lighting them on fire. It's cool if you can do it, but now it's also infinitely more dangerous. So now if we fail, we're going to burn.
Yeah, I got to be honest with you. Big Spoon always had a pianist for all of our shows, and I can't tell you a single time that I even noticed it was going on. So there's been more times where it doesn't throw me off than when it does.
Yeah.
But if I don't even notice that it's happening, does it need to be there? Can we give that $50 to the tech person, or can we give that $50 to the server who's bringing drinks, or can we give it to? Can everyone on the team have $3 for the show?
Yeah.
I don't know.
Do you write much?
No, not as much as I used to, not as much as I should, which is the classic improviser answer. I used to write a lot when I started doing improv, and it, like I said, it went from having to write new jokes every week to just don't be so drunk. That's all you got to do to prep for this show, you know. So I got real lazy with that and undisciplined.
When you were writing, did you listen to music as you wrote, or what atmosphere was most conducive for you?
I like listening to instrumental music. If I'm trying to write and there's any lyrics or singing or rapping or talking, then now all I hear is those words, and I can no longer hear the words I'm trying to put together in my head. So instrumental's great. I like lo-fi beats when I write. Yeah. During quarantine, I was writing a screenplay with a friend, and it was a Western that we were writing, just as an exercise to do. So I listened to the guy that did all the, like, Good, the Bad, the Ugly, whoever the composer was. I was listening to his music.
Yeah.
You know, all that wow, 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 wow.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was fun to listen to, put me in the vibe of writing a Western.
I didn't know if there was a corollary, because I feel like, for me, I can do some jazz that has vocals, but for me it's kind of a jazz kind of thing for me if I'm writing. That can kind of settle in the back of my brain. But if the TV is on, even in another room sometimes, I'm like, I can't, I'm just too distracted. And I feel like the musicians that liked to not just underscore certain moments, but would noodle the entire time, they felt like they had to play the entire time. It's so distracting for me. I just can't get beyond the fact that that's going on back there.
That's a great comparison you just made. I hadn't thought about that, because music can also distract me when I'm writing. If it's a hip-hop beat that really makes me want to bob my head, now I'm not thinking about what I'm writing, you know. So, again, it all comes down to we don't need pianists in our creative work.
Yeah.
Get rid of them. dirty little ivory pickers.
In your estimation, what makes a good scene partner?
I think a good scene partner is someone who can recognize and find the game of the scene while establishing and maintaining relationship. So all the different tools you would use for that, like give and take, POV, all that kind of stuff. But I think that's what it comes down to. It's someone who can recognize if there is a game that you are doing, or provide something that can be a game and recognize when you pick up on it, and also talk about each other as opposed to what you're doing. Talk about the relationship, talk about each other's lives. Don't talk about the cake that you're baking.
When you think about Will and Dumb John and the people that you really like to play with, is there a particular quality or aspect that they all have in common?
Yeah. When I think about people like Will, and I think about people like Pat Rourke and Steve Plock from Dumb John, like, these are people that they have a character POV at all times. No matter what you throw at them or what happens to them, all they're going to do is exactly what you just did to them, but harder, right? You can't throw off someone who just heightens everything you do. And it doesn't necessarily mean volume and noise and getting bigger and bigger.
Right.
It just means picking up what you just threw at them and throwing it right back. I know Will Miner very well. We are an odd couple. We are two people that should not be friends, but we are very close friends. And I know the things that annoy him in real life, and so he knows when I'm doing them on purpose on stage. So he knows how I want him to react, and he'll either react that way or the exact opposite way. He knows that it needs a reaction. Or Steve Block, he is so fast to pick up on the subtext of what my character is doing and respond in a way that's going to heighten what I'm doing and make what I'm doing sharper. Pat Rourke, you hit him with a curveball, he'll just throw the exact same curveball at you 10 times harder. You can't throw people like that off.
Nice.
Yeah. Hope that makes sense.
Yeah, this is what I heard, so you can correct me if I'm wrong, that you really enjoy playing with people that complement you and are not the same as you in how they play, and people that can take your offers and heighten them by pitching them back to you at twice the speed or more.
Yeah, or even like there's so many times playing with Steve Block, for example, on Dumb John, where maybe I'm not offering something for him to hit out of the park or give back to me, but he will subtly say something or do something where I hear it or see it and go, oh, he's setting me up to hit something out of the park right now. He just gave me something to heighten. He just gave me the idea of something he wants me to throw at him, kind of thing.
So to go back to something you said earlier, then if I'm trying to synthesize this in some way, that it's people that you know well enough to be able to understand what they're doing and they understand what you're doing, and then you can play with each other within that.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying that very well, but...
Yeah, but that's almost unfair to say, talking improv, to be like, well, the best thing is to just have someone that you played with forever and you know each other inside and out. That's essentially what I'm saying. But, like, for example, maybe I'll walk onto a scene and I don't have a big idea or anything. A lot of times I'll just come on with a physicality and then try to discover it. So maybe I'll come in and kick the refrigerator door open and grab a beer and crack it open and just go, and take a drink. That's the only idea I have. And I'll look over at Steve, and he'll just object work closing a robe over himself in like a fussy way, like he doesn't want me to see, and then turn his back to me a little bit. And then in that moment, I'm like, oh, perfect. He just defined our entire relationship with that move.
Yeah, yeah.
She feels neglected. She's not happy with me. That's my wife. Body language just established all of those things. And now I can really keep pushing that button.
Yeah. I don't think there's anything wrong with enjoying playing with people that we know well. I think that especially after you get to know people, you can play really well with anybody, but there's something special about playing with people that are, like you said, legitimately friends.
That's like the Super Saiyan level, right? That's like you want to get to the level where you can play with anyone. But then if you can also take the performance-enhancing drug of having it be your good buddies, then that's even better.
Yeah. Is there any advice that you would give your younger self?
The thing that took me the longest to understand and that held me back the longest in regards to long-form improv was don't try to be funny. And they would say that all the time. But then when I would watch good shows, they were funny.
Yeah.
It took me a long time to figure that out. So I think I've figured out a way that I would wish someone would have taught me, and that's how I teach students now, which is if you are always coming from a place of emotional honesty and recognizable human behavior, and all you do is react to an honest emotion that you or your character feels without trying to make it funny, just strictly being emotionally honest, then you will be funny on accident over and over and over again.
Yeah.
The second you stop reacting with honest emotion in a recognizable human way and try to be funny, you will fail every time because it will not work.
Yeah.
Audiences are smart. They can smell fake a mile away. They want to see that exposed nerve. They want something they can relate to. The only thing an audience can relate to is emotion. Show that, and you will accidentally be funny over and over. If someone would have told me that, that would have unlocked doors a lot sooner.
When did that click for you? Was it just reps, or was there a moment when you got a laugh you weren't expecting or a response you weren't expecting in an honest moment that it clicked, or was it seeing someone else? You don't have to have a moment. I'm just curious.
Yeah, I do have a moment. I don't think it was like the moment that changed everything, because I think it was a long journey of getting beat with a belt over and over again until I learned the lesson. But there is a moment where it was like the first time where I didn't think, I just reacted to the emotion that my scene partner made me feel in that moment, and it got one of the biggest laughs I've ever got on stage, and it was a complete accident. And that was a huge moment of realization for me. That was in that show, Set the Scene, and Sarah Delamico, who's a very, very funny performer, initiated a scene by stomping up to me and scolding me in a really mean way. Why can't I find any damn toilet paper in this store? And it made me, in that instant, like my real life person, in that moment, I felt little, like a little child being scolded by my mean mom. And I didn't have that thought. I just had that emotion.
Yeah.
And so I just immediately came out of my mouth like a little scared little boy, and I just said something along the lines of, People bought it all. It's just something about, like, I don't know, people bought all the toilet paper. That's why you can't
Yeah.
find it. But it came from a place of a grown man talking like a terrified little boy. Because in that moment, that's how I felt. And it got us this huge reaction from the audience. And I remember just thinking, like, oh, all I did was verbalize the emotion I felt.
Yeah.
That's it. There was no punchline. It was just raw emotion, and it got a huge laugh.
Are you kidding? I mean, on paper, why is there no toilet paper in this place? People bought it all. I mean, that's comedy gold on paper.
Yeah, right. Yeah. I know, as I was saying that, I'm like, I just built up this huge moment, but it wasn't funny. But it was funny. The audience related to it somehow.
Yeah, no, it's funny because of the sincerity of it, yeah. Sometimes it takes that moment of the experience of it for things to really click. Because I know I could point at some examples of that in my life, too. It's like, oh, yeah, this moment really made things click for me because of the way that it happened. And if it would have happened differently, it would have taken me longer or a different route to get to the next level. And it's really great when those moments happen because then you can think, oh, all of the education and everything you've done before that really makes you able to understand what just happened.
Right.
And without that, it would happen. You'd be like, I don't know what happened. I'm going to go on stage next week and I'll be like, somebody bought it all. And then it's going to bomb. You're like, I don't know. It killed last week.
Yeah, that's something I try to teach from a place of, like, because the way I work is, how do I feel in this moment?
Yeah.
Do I feel present? Do I not feel present? Ooh, this feels good. Ooh, this feels bad. In class, I'll try to recreate these moments to make my students feel very bad or feel very good. Do something that makes them feel very good. Give them like a little hack tip, like, all right, do a scene work. I want you two to be burying a body at a park, but I want you to only be talking about Netflix. And don't talk as characters, just talk in real life how you would, but you're burying a body. And then it's just this great scene of two people hiding a body they killed while they're talking about Downton Abbey or something. And they're like, wait a minute, why did that work? And I go, because it worked for two reasons. One, the juxtaposition of you talking about something different than what you're doing, and the juxtaposition of that gravity of what you're doing versus what you're talking about. And two, recognizable human behavior where you're not talking plot the way you don't talk in real life. All right, now let's try it again. I want you guys to be baking a cake together and just talk about the cake that you're baking. And then it's two people arguing over ingredients. I'm like, that feel good or bad? And I'm like, it felt hard. Why did that feel hard? And then we talk about it. And I say, well, I want you to remember that feeling. Memorize that feeling you have in your bones of this feels really good and this feels really bad. And whenever you feel that in your bones of this feels really bad, you know something's not going right. Go back to the basics, which is don't talk about what you're doing. Connect with your scene partner or whatever it is that we're working on at that moment.
Yeah.
I think it's more important to understand when something feels bad as opposed to why it feels bad.
Yeah.
Because step one is recognizing that something feels bad. And once you can do that, then you can take the next step into why.
And the classroom's definitely a much safer place to experience that than experiencing it for the first time on stage.
Yeah, and if you can have someone like telling you in real time when it's happening and why it's happening, then you don't have to do a year and a half of set the scene and figure it out on accident.
But I mean, that's the alternative, right? You can always be like, well, if you didn't figure it out here, here's a show you could do for a year and a half.
Yeah. And then you always got to tell people, like, by the way, you're going to eat shit for a long time. And it'll never stop. You'll never stop eating shit. You'll just eat shit less frequently over the years. That's all.
Yeah. Do you have a favorite type of character to play?
I certainly have some go-tos that I can kind of lock into and are really fun. My favorite one is just a really heightened version of kind of how I feel, to a point where it's no longer me at all, but it is kind of inspired by me, which is just like that boy who's stronger than he should be at that age and is a little bit dumber than he should be at that age, like the baby Huey kind of character who's just really, really wants connection. I think that's a very versatile character that everyone can relate to. I love doing that guy. Almost all the characters I play on stage are different versions of people I know in real life, and I know a lot of like really gruff, macho, toxic masculinity, like characters that you think are made up but are actually real. And if I just do impressions of them on stage, like I might not heighten or exaggerate anything at all, and people are like, where do you come up with this stuff? Like, oh, that's my Uncle Jim.
Yeah.
That's a guy I know who lives in a junkyard and only eats jackrabbits. I didn't make that up, like so like that really rough northern Nevada desert good old boy is another character I like to do a lot, just because there are people I know like that I love so much.
Nice. If you could do a scene with anyone living, who would it be?
Stephen Cadwell.
Oh, you're my answer.
That's a hard one because, my favorite thing to do is to play with someone that I've been playing with forever and I'm really comfortable with, and we know each other's heartbeat kind of thing on stage. So I would want to say Steve Block. I've been playing with him forever, and I love doing scenes with him. But like someone that I really admire that I would just love to share a stage with, Colleen Doyle from Dummy and Virgin Daiquiri, maybe Tim Robinson from Cook County Social Club, and I Think You Should Leave. But yeah, he was the guy I was looking up to when I was coming through classes and
Yeah.
watching at IO. So that would be a big like honor to share a stage with those two.
If you could do a scene with anyone who is no longer with us in the pantheon of everyone who has gone before, who would it be?
This is kind of a tough one to talk about, and I know it's probably more so for you. But honestly, it's someone I think about all the time, which is Greg Yates. I had a lot of classes with him. You came up from Florida with him, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, so you've been playing with him for a lot longer, and we're good buddies with him, and unfortunately, he passed. We shared a very similar vibe in a lot of ways, and in a lot of ways we didn't, but like we had a connection, and he was someone that anytime I saw on stage, I just couldn't stop laughing. It's like if a cartoon character could somehow be grounded. I don't know how to explain it. But that's someone who I think would have played with Dumb John really well. Because Dumb John is a very physical team, very absurd, very wacky, very high energy, very character-driven, but at the same time relatable and relationships and grounded through emotion. And that's exactly how he played.
Yeah.
And I never got to play with him after I got good at improv. He was always so much better than me. But now that I feel like I'm pretty decent, I would love to play with him.
From what you're saying, I think he would have enjoyed Dumb John as well, because one of the things he lamented to me a lot when we were up there was that a lot of the teams that we were watching, he would say, it's missing something silly. It's missing a silly element of some kind. They're taking themselves too seriously.
Yeah.
And so I think he tried to bring that to everything that he did when he was up there. We saw it in Cook County. They had it. But there are a lot of other places where it just seemed like, oh, this would be so much better if you just had this other element that's missing.
Yeah. There's nothing more insulting to me than, and I've heard people who I respect, improvisers, say this to me after a Dumb John show, like, hey, man, let's say Dumb John had a show that we absolutely crushed, felt so good. And then this person after the show will say, like, hey, man, it's good to see people not be afraid to do dumb comedy, man. I really enjoy that. And I'm like, that's actually very insulting to me, but thank you. I don't say that. I say thank you for the compliment, but to me that's not a compliment, because just like what Greg is saying, there's an intersection where stupidity and brilliance, they intersect. It's a lot more of that Venn diagram where they don't intersect, but there is a sliver where it's the same thing.
Yeah.
It's gold. I love it. It's, to me, the highest brow comedy can be done with the lowest brow tools in the toolbox. You can't just be making a dick joke to make a dick joke. You can make a dick joke if you're satirizing the POV of an archetype of some sort. Like we do a lot of, on our team, we satirize Americana and the current climate. We don't really do it unconsciously, but that's what we do. And so if I'm out there playing a redneck who thinks the school's turning my kids into gay robots, yeah, that's a really dumb thing. But I know people who are almost there already thinking that.
Yeah.
And that's something I always really appreciate about Greg. He would initiate scenes with an initiation that was a reaction to something that didn't happen yet. I always thought that was so brilliant. Like, he'd walk out, and the first thing out of anyone's mouth be him grabbing his face and being like, why did you hit me?
Yeah.
Or I once did a scene with him in class where the entire scene was him repeatedly getting trapped under his own... Oh, man, what a haunting thing to say now that I'm about to say it. But it was him getting trapped under his own motorcycle over and over again. Like, he'd be sitting on there and revving while we were having a conversation, and then it would shoot out from under him, and he'd get stuck under it. But he didn't want to stop the conversation, and he didn't want to help.
Yeah.
So then he would get back out, and it just kept doing it over and over again. And it was so dumb, but so smart and funny at the same time. Yeah.
If you could do a scene with anyone fictional, who would it be?
Lieutenant Commander Data from Star Trek Next Generation.
That was legitimately my answer as well.
Are you serious?
Yeah.
No way.
Part of it for me is because I would also like to do a scene with Brent Spiner, but
Right.
Data, I think, would be what intrigues you most about that.
It would be like a stripped down, heightened version of genuine reaction.
Yeah.
He wouldn't try to be funny. Unfortunately, he can't feel emotion, which is tough in long form improv to not have any emotional POV whatsoever, but he could certainly pretend he did and be very bad at it, and that would be really fun to play with. Or even just, you could make a game out of anything he did, and he wouldn't even know it was a game, but he would continue the game.
Yeah.
So whether it's trying to get him to use a contraction, because he doesn't speak with contractions, that would be a fun game. Like, I do not understand. Well, you could say don't. you could say you don't understand. Like what, you know, like you could do a whole scene like that. Or you could draw on his endless knowledge of science. He got like the internet in his brain, right? So you could draw on all that. You could get as physical as you wanted. You know, you could do a lot of slapstick where he's picking you up in the air with one finger. Like it was just, but I think what it comes down to is just the childlike innocence of him not knowing what's going on the entire time.
Yeah, I think it would be a hell of a show as well.
What was your reason?
I think you touched on, but especially there at the end, it's like because he's going to take everything literally because he's a very literal person, but in like you said, a very innocent way, not in a way that's like I'm being stupid because he's super intelligent, but is taking everything literal. So just to play with that, you know, dichotomy of someone who can be a little more figurative and someone who's taking everything literally because that's just how their brain works.
Yeah, and then on the other side of that spectrum would be fun to play with Lieutenant Commander Worf because of the exact opposite. He's overly emotional and very stupid.
Yeah. And he could also pick you up and spin you around with
also superhuman strength. Yeah.
We touched on this. Is there much tech going on other than blackouts?
No, however, Dumb John does do something that we don't need it. We don't always use it, but whenever we have the chance, we ask for it, which is a spotlight. So we use spotlights a lot in our show. We have like kind of our own form where we do a lot of character monologues throughout the piece, improvised character monologues, and whenever we initiate one of those, we like to go to a spotlight. But that's about it. But you know what? There is Dan, the new head of tech at I.O. It's really fun playing with him in the booth. Now, this I like more than a piano player messing with the show. I like when the light booth person does it. You know, when you're in a car or something and he hits a sound effect that he thinks is helpful and it never is, it's fun to try to justify it. Or like if we're doing like some trippy, whooshy abstract performance thing, which we like to do sometimes, and he can mess with the lights and make it green and blue or like a strobe. Or if we're like in a bunker or like playing demons, he can make it all red. One time he brought a flashlight that was like a million candle power, like mag light with a strobe.
Yeah.
And we had this like weird trippy thing, and he took all the lights off and then just hit us with the flashlight. Like there's a few people that do tech like that in a lot of weird abstract ways, which I really enjoy. But overall, there's not a whole lot of tech going on besides blackouts. But yeah, we like to mess with that a lot. There was a show that was using AI on a projector where they were using ChatGPT to get suggestions. So that was a very tech-heavy thing. I don't know how necessary or like what it really added to the show, to be honest. I think it's a cool idea that they should explore more. But it was sort of tech-heavy for no reason.
Yeah.
But the improv was very funny and good. People are experimenting, I guess, is the answer to that.
Well, that's cool. The theater I was connected with in Florida was short form theater, and the tech is involved a lot. In between games is playing music and different things, so they're a lot more active. So I have two questions that are, what do you find most helpful from the booth, and what do you find least helpful from the booth, but they may not be relevant.
Oh, real quick, though, Steve Clark did a show called Laugh Track, where he had a laugh track like a sitcom.
Yeah. And
he would have someone in the booth use that throughout the show. That was really funny. But what I think the light person can do that's very helpful is honestly changing the color of the lights and spotlights and things like that in different moments, I think can add an awful lot. I don't think it's super helpful. I know I said it's fun to justify this, but it's only fun when it's easy to do. But like sound effects that don't make sense for what you're doing.
Yeah.
To me, that's like someone on the sideline making a fart noise in your scene because they think it's funny.
Yeah.
But, there's been other times where it's more apt and very cool, like where like I go to throw something away or whatever, and you hit the button that makes it sound like a window just broke. I think stuff like that can be funny. It's a thin line between success and failure with that, but I think it's something fun to explore. Our old tech guy for Dumb John, he doesn't do it anymore, but he was our tech guy for years. His name was Dan Shea. And we used to mess with him a lot by randomly in a scene being like, oh, I love the song, and then going to like turn it on, knowing that he was panicking to find a song and hit play.
Yeah.
And then we would like sing the song or whatever. And so that was always fun to do with him.
Other than laughter, what audience sound do you revel in?
I love a genuine, accidentally audible, like a, oh.
Yeah.
Oh. I love showing a genuine vulnerability, like a moment of vulnerability between like a father-son or something like that, because people, they don't always expect a moment of non-comedic emotional display. And when you can hit them with something like that, say something that's genuine because it's genuine as opposed to ironically genuine, and you can hear someone go, oh, I love that.
Yeah. I feel like those moments really make the funny moments even funnier because you've taken them on a trip instead of just trying to maintain this the whole time.
Yeah. I also love an accidental laugh where you do something that might be not purposely funny or a little inappropriate or something like that, and there's just one person in the audience that lets out like a like immediately realizes they're the only one laughing. I like that a lot too.
They suddenly revealed something about themselves in that moment.
Yeah. Yeah.
What is the worst venue you've ever played in?
A couple of years ago, Dumb John did a show at a brewery at some sort of festival thing. So it was this huge factory warehouse, like 30, 40-foot ceilings, 100 picnic tables, people at the picnic tables facing each other eating, and in the corner was a raised stage about 15 feet by 15 feet with no lighting and one microphone on a stand in the middle of the stage. Trying to do improv in there. Like, we had a +1 table 5 feet from the stage full of our friends and girlfriends and whatever, and they told us they couldn't even hear us. So it was just us playing to a back of the room that was 1,000 feet away when no one's even paying attention to us.
Yeah.
Trying to figure out how to use this one microphone. It was awful. Sketchbook Brewery was where it was at, in Skokie, Illinois.
Was it a paid gig?
Yeah.
So at least there was that.
Yeah. We also did a show at the State Street Sundays on State, which is like a big Chicago street festival. That's like a street festival. So there's just funnel cakes and people selling those maps. So they're just like, neighborhoods of Chicago. And like, we're on an outdoor stage with folding chairs. The acts that were before us were like Newsies Jr., Les Miserables, and then like Motown, hits from Motown, and then Dumb John doing 50 minutes of long-form improv outdoor at a street festival where we have 2 handheld mics, and the only sort of attention we're getting is people walking by who you can't walk by a long-form improv show that you don't know is happening and understand what's happening. That was crazy.
Did you say 50 minutes?
Yeah.
People walking by minute 30. Huh.
Yep.
Let's go get some funnel cake.
Yeah, people like walking by to look for the funnel cake, and they're like, what is this guy on stage with a microphone yelling about moose heads? What the hell is going on?
We need to find an organizer. I think someone has commandeered the stage.
Yeah, this drunk guy's got a microphone.
What's the best note or words of wisdom that you've received?
One that I like a lot from Noah Gregoropoulos was, it's better to feed the audience a spoonful of shit at the beginning instead of shoveling shit in their face the entire time. And by that, I took that to mean, like, if you can start a scene with a relationship and a POV and a place or a premise immediately and then never talk about it again, like, if you can initiate a scene by being like, hello, father, as your 8-year-old son, it was a rough day at school today and I was bullied and now I need you to sign this detention slip. No one talks like that in real life. That's
right.
Not a great line of dialogue, but now the entire scene is set and you can get into the meat of the scene and get going.
Yeah.
So feed them that tiny bit of bullshit up top, then do good scene work, as opposed to shoveling massive amounts of shit for 2.5 minutes, trying to figure out who I am, who you are, what I'm doing here, all that stuff.
Yeah.
And I think that's kind of hyperbolic to say start a scene with a sentence like that, because you could just have that in your head. That's all you need to do. But you certainly could just start the scene with a sentence like that, and it would be great.
Yeah.
The audience would forget it and move on and just enjoy the scene.
Yeah. They're not going to remember that bit at the beginning. They're going to remember the stuff that you do. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah.
Sage advice. I like it. What's the worst or least helpful note that you've received and or can conceive of?
Just be yourself. I didn't know what that meant for so long, and I think it held me back for so long, and no one ever explained it to me. Like, just act like yourself. All you got to do is be like how you would naturally be on stage. Just be yourself. Just be yourself. And I'm like, well, that doesn't work. Like, I would never allow someone to speak to me like this in real life. Yeah. I would never not tell this person to shut the fuck up, or I would never, I couldn't figure out how to change parts of my POV or opinion so that I could still be myself in a scene. So I think it's great advice, be yourself, but I think it's much better advice to say it differently. Like, try to use recognizable human behavior.
Yeah.
Or listen to your actual emotions and use those as inspiration. But, like, be yourself is just like, okay, well, I'm not a pirate. So how do I, sure, maybe that is good advice for people that are smarter, but for me, it wasn't.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, I think regardless of intellect or smarts, that can be confusing because, I think you're right. Like, what does that mean? And why not say what you mean instead of telling me the thing that you've heard other people say and you think is a cool thing?
I know. I always tell people, like, in order to look like a normal human having a normal human conversation on stage, you have to use your brain in a way that normal humans do not use them in normal human conversation. So you have to rewire your brain and use it in a way that normal humans don't, just so you look like a normal human on stage.
Yeah.
So when someone says just be yourself, that's not going to work.
You're right. I love that. I'm going to steal it. If there were an Academy Awards for everything improv, what would you be nominated for?
Maybe physicality.
Okay.
I'm a very physical player, and I think that's the one thing I sort of enjoy and do the most.
If you're remembered 100 years from now for something improv related, what would you want it to be?
Improv has become my art and something that I'm very passionate about, and I try very hard to always get better at it. It's something I don't think I've mastered. I want to always be working on it, and I've come to a place where I look at improv as more than just being funny. You know, I look at it as in regards to an entire piece, to a scene, to a moment, to a character, to a game, to like I have a very technical mind when I'm doing improv of all the different moving parts that are going, and it may not look like it because I do a lot of dumb characters and a lot of silly stuff. So to be remembered as someone who was a smart player would mean a lot to me. You know, like I said before, when someone says, oh, it's fun to see someone who's not afraid to do stupid humor, I think of that as an insult because, I may do stupid jokes, but that's not what's going on in my head when I'm doing them.
Well, and a lot of that stuff, and I think of Martin and Lewis. I know you mentioned Abbott and Costello, but a lot of that stuff looks easy, but it's taking a lot of intellect to come across the way that they're coming across.
Yeah.
There's a lot going on there, and it's deceptive because if you do it well, then the people watching aren't necessarily aware of that. So, I mean, if you can think of it that way. If they're giving you that compliment, it's because you did it so well that they didn't see it.
Yeah, it's like Steve Martin. When he was doing stand-up, it was like he was doing really stupid, dumb stuff, but that's really not what he was doing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's it for this interview with Mike. Try and see him play if you're ever in Chicago. In fact, find out when he's playing and go ahead and plan your trip around that. You can find info about Mike and myself in the show notes. If you're enjoying the podcast, please rate and review it wherever you're listening, and head on over to Patreon and become a subscriber to the podcast over there, and you'll get bonus content even at the free level. In fact, I just posted some more phone prov I did with Charles. It's called a board meeting, as well as another dream cycle. What are those things? You'll just have to head over to Patreon and find out. However and wherever you listen, thank you, and I look forward to the next Improv Autopsy.